Episode 2016, Rogan and I are sitting together. And whether it was with me or Lex Friedman, he said, I will never have Trump on. They've tried many times for me to have Trump on. And Rogan's like, I'm not going to have him on, right? Rogan at one point said he's voting for Bernie Sanders. He said this publicly. I think he said it on an episode. Could have been like 6 years ago, 40. I don't know what it was, but he said he's voting for Bernie. So here's a guy that was a Bernie guy. Here's a guy that was one of the bigger reasons why marijuana became legal in many different places where he's given it. Here's a guy that's a man's man, UFC fighting guy. And today, your father is sitting with him.
I know.
Amazing.
Is that not, but think about this. How do you lose Rogan? How do you lose Bobby? How do you lose Tulsi? How do you lose Elon? You're losing these types of people, and Trump, the boogeyman, is gaining them? Wait, what? By the way, today when they're doing a podcast together with Joe, there's a lot of numbers and data that you can look at. You know, Joe being the greatest conversationalist and the number one podcast worldwide. When he and I are sitting there talking, he says, Pat, I don't know if you know or not, the podcast is number one in 94 different countries on Spotify. It's not just number one.
94
countries is where he's at, right? And he's dominating that game.
Yeah.
After this, is it like, let the people talk and do their thing, and let's see what's going to happen November 5th?
Yeah, listen, yes and no. Obviously, I have huge respect for Rogan. I kind of grew up with the UFCs, right? I've seen him my entire life. We've known him for a while, and share so many mutual friends. But no, I listen. I don't think you ever take your foot off the gas. It's kind of like not in our DNA to do so.
No,
right?
But what I'm saying is this the last podcast you guys are doing after him? It's done, or is he still going on different things?
It's probably the last kind of formal podcast,
okay.
Right? There might be other
yeah.
Twitter Spaces and other things with the
Makes sense.
Elons and other people,
Right.
but. Again, he's just not one of these guys that ever pulls his foot off the gas. He's let's go hot and heavy all the way to the end, right? There are no days off, there are no breaks, there are no vacations. There's this guy who doesn't take vacation, and let's go hot and heavy. So no, he's gonna be running hard all the way through, bud. I mean, he has to. I mean, that's in his DNA. You can't turn that DNA off, right? It's almost the thing he gets criticized the most for, being a fighter, is his greatest attribute, and the thing that you want most in a person, which is. Like, can Mike Tyson turn off his punch? Right, he can't. Right, he only has one speed, and that's to hit hard. And my father, in the same way, is much like that. So no, he'll absolutely charge through the next 12 days. But I don't think you'll have any podcasts that even remotely reaches the level of Rogan, because there really is none. Right, I mean the guy's been transformational to media. And by the way, I freaking love to see it. I love to see it. I love to see what you guys are doing. I love to see what Rogan's doing. I love to see what all these great my wife, she's got a great podcast. I love to see what all of them are doing, because it's honestly is making the CNNs irrelevant. People are just consuming media in a very different way. And it kind of takes the corruption out of freedom of speech. I mean, you're doing as much for this whole effort as Elon Musk, who are out there fighting for free speech every day. But just by being successful, you're kind of champion free speech, right? And you're kind of making the others, irrelevant, which I think is a great thing for this country and frankly the world.
While we're on this topic, the one guy that's come around, which is kind of weird, and I got a lot of slack, I got a lot of heat for it at the beginning. I was like, you're such a, I bet you're going to turn Valuetainment into, this is all you're doing. Why would you ever bring that piece of, I mean, it was like, brother, it was insane.
Who was saying this?
I don't even want to say it, but
Tell me.
Trust me, it's the cream of the crop everybody was saying about us bringing Cuomo in here, right? And when we brought Cuomo in, we did the couple live podcasts with him and Candace, with him and Dave Smith. He sat down with Dave Smith. It was a tough one.
Oh, yeah.
He was in a lion's, to be honest with you. It was. I don't know if anybody was for him, except maybe 10 people were for him in the room. And he came around. And then yesterday, he's doing a town hall, Rob. If you got this clip with J.D. Vance, and he's what a great moment, right? When he's with J.D. and he says, hey, matter of fact, I'll just let you watch this for yourself, and I want you to react to this yourself. Go ahead. Here's Chris Cuomo.
For this one. Oh, no.
Not unlike Beetlejuice. If you invoke the former president's names too many times in a row, he's going to want to weigh in on what is being said about him. And we have a call right now from former President Donald John Trump. He wants to weigh in. Mr. President, I know there's a little bit of a delay. Can you hear us? And what is your question for the senator?
Well, I can hear you, Chris, and I do have a question, and I think it'll be quite an interesting one. The answer should be easy. How brilliant is Donald J. Trump?
They're not laughing.
She was not happy at all.
His answer
Take
was
your
great.
time. Think about it.
Well, first of all, sir, this is supposed to be undecided voters. I would hope that I have your vote of all people. But here's first of all, sir, of course, you're very brilliant, and we both agree. We both agree that it's important to have very smart people running our government. But here's the thing about President Trump that aside of you, sir, if you'll forgive me for telling this story that I think often people don't see. And of course, I got my beautiful wife here in the front row. And one of my favorite moments with President Trump is we were hosting an event for him near our home in Cincinnati a few months ago. And of course, my wife was a little bit nervous to really, talk to the president of the United States. And he asked her, what do you think about your husband being in public service? And she gives, if you know my wife, a very diplomatic answer. Sir, he really cares about the people of Ohio. He's thrilled to be able to serve them, and I'm happy to support him however I can. And President Trump chuckles and goes, yeah, my wife hates it too. and the thing that it did is it just immediately broke the barrier. And it wasn't the former president. It was just a person talking to my wife. And I think you guys were able to have a nice conversation. But that ability to relate to anybody in any environment, I think that's the true brilliance of Donald J. Trump.
So, by the way, another great moment. And if there's one person that's really grown on everybody's JD, but I want to focus on Chris for this moment now. How are you individually yourself, processing what's happened with Cuomo after leaving CNN, fired, Don Lemon himself, him going to News Nation, him coming on him doing all. Who is Chris Cuomo to you guys now?
So remember, Patrick, I knew all of these people, and I knew them pre-politics, right? Erin Brunette, she'd come over to Trump Tower, she would have lunch with us all the time, right? You mentioned Mika and Joe the other. I mean, Mika and Joe literally used to half live in Mar-a-Lago. They'd go down there, on weekends. They spent a tremendous amount of time down there. They were in our office all the time. I mean, they absolutely loved us. Donnie Deutsch, I used to do Donnie Deutsch's show all the time when he was on CNBC. I'd go across to Fort Lee and film. I mean, these people absolutely adored us until one moment. And that's when my father stepped foot on, I don't even think he said a word at that point. He stepped foot on that escalator, and then all of a sudden the light switch just shut off. And I knew Chris very, very well. I knew him before CNN. I knew him at CNN. I mean, I did a show a ton of times in 2016 and all the years on CNN. And now I still go on a show on News Nation. And what's really remarkable is kind of the ebbs and flows of these people, right? On CNN, he had one gear, and that's anti-Trump. And now all of a sudden he realizes that he's no longer at CNN and no longer really works for his persona, and he's actually doing much better today than I think he ever was. He's actually gained kind of a following because, and I actually enjoy going on his show. It's good, sometimes heated debate, but he can be sensible when he wasn't sensible on CNN whatsoever. And so, the problem is, how at some point you've got to look at your heart and soul and actually be sincere as an individual and have conviction. And, you kind of can't bop and weave, and that's what creates mistrust. And so the question is, as good as he's done coming out of CNN, can he ever fully regain what somebody who didn't have that baggage, because again, so many of the positions he took, the Russia hoax, they were truly nonsensical. And now all of a sudden it sounds like he's making sense. Listen, I'm not sure if he's any fan of ours, to tell you the truth. He's still probably on the other side, but at least he'll give honest answers and have a spirited debate and do so with a smile on his face and ask a question like that or kind of pull a stunt like that. And listen, it's nice to see. I still think it's insincere if you look at character, because I don't think if you really kind of have moral conviction, can you change like that? I mean,
that's heavy, what you just said right there. Mm-hmm. And the part that I see with what you're saying, and I've spent a lot of time with him behind closed doors and on camera, and we've had a lot of discussions about this next, I'm a free agent campaign that he's on, is the part that I think he relates to you and has sympathy for you, and maybe he's realizing that the unfairness of the media that attacked you and your family, including himself, is because his father was Mario Cuomo. And his father was a governor.
But I call BS on that, right? There should be no one that understands that game better than him, knowing that his father was Mario
exactly
Cuomo,
what I'm saying. Right. That's what I'm saying.
So if you understood that game, you should be at least sympathetic to that game, right? It's I would think that would actually open your eyes.
While he's in it?
I don't know, more so than the random news host who grew up through, different media markets in the country, worked their way up and have been blindly told what to say for 15 years and only got their big break in life because they followed orders.